So welcome to the Connection Regenerator podcast. I am Tanja, a co-founder of Totelly and your host for this podcast. Totelly is a social enterprise that focuses on three core pillars in all its activities and products. The three core pillars are self-connection, connection with others, and nature connection. We're based in Gothenburg, Iceland. Totelly is one of the partners of the Connection Regenerator project, which is funded by Erasmus+. A similar podcast was recorded in Iași just last week in Romania with our partners Maibine. The purpose of the project is both to create local facilitators that often offer community events called offers and needs markets, as well as offer materials on various aspects of life from a regenerative lifestyle lens. This podcast is intended to be a cross-generational discussion on life as we see it today, with an inquiry into regenerative lifestyles through the sharings of our guests. And before we get into discussion, let's give our listeners a chance to get to know our guests better. Welcome, Svenja. Could you please share about yourself with our listeners? Where are you from? What do you do? Or what are you most passionate about at this stage in your life?
Yeah, my name is Svenja. I'm from Germany. I am about to graduate from my master's that I did here in Iceland in environment and natural resources. And so the kind of past year, I've been working on my thesis, which was about eco-anxiety and contemplative practices. So I interviewed multiple people about their eco-anxiety and their contemplative practice, such as yoga, meditation. I also interviewed some activists and kind of trying to figure out if their practice can help them both be a more active person in kind of combating ecological crises, but also in feeling better and sort of looking at the mental health lens of it as well. Yeah, now I'm just working, or I'm working at a restaurant, and yeah, but I'm planning like this summer where me and my boyfriend are leaving Iceland actually, and then planning to travel more in Europe, and kind of undecided yet what exactly we're going to do, but I'm excited to do something around this whole topic of kind of connecting to communities, maybe teaching some retreats or something connected to this.
Beautiful, thank you. And Sigurborg, could you share with our listeners something about yourself, your profession, what defines you, what are you passionate about, and what has guided you in your life so far? Lots of questions there.
Now those are big.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in a small village in Iceland, Stykkishólmur, and I now live in the village next to it. So I live in my home area where I really had my roots. It's taken me most of my life to try to decide what I want to be when I grow up. And from going to a commercial high school to studying sociology and social work to doing a master's degree in tourism planning and development, working in hotels and managing hotels. But then my spiritual need really kicked in, and I trained as a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and 5 rhythms teacher, which is a dance that combines body and spirit really, and mind and heart. Okay. But life really took me on a path of working with public participation. So for like 24 years now, that's been the backbone of my work. And it came out of a passionate, where my passion led me into managing a project in the East where I was living at the time, an environmental project that really was about involving local people. I didn't know when we started, but that's how it evolved. And I really felt I needed different ways of working and having conversation between the authorities and the local people. And I went and I've been learning such methods and using them. And just to name the project that is dearest to my heart, I have been responsible for facilitating 2-day community meetings or community assemblies, as we call them, in fragile communities in Iceland. It's really small communities that really don't know if they will live or die, basically. And it's about empowering the local people. And we use open space so we don't know. People will decide what they want to talk about. And I've seeing the empowerment in this. I just absolutely love it. And now, as I'm 65, I'm just coming really to the point of my career, so to speak. I'm sharing knowledge. I'm just giving courses and sharing knowledge in any way I can, just handing this on to the next generation, whatever might be useful of the knowledge that I've gained. And I've also taught yoga and 5 rhythms dance, and there's been this, just to sum this up, after doing a yoga teacher training, I was like, oh, this is so good. Everything is just good and beautiful here. Can't I just stay here, like be in this part of life for the rest of my life? But I just felt very strongly I need to have, like, walk in both worlds, so to speak. So the spiritual and the more material, I have to have one foot in each. So that's been my journey, at times struggles also, and it has also sustained me. So yeah.
Thank you, both of you. That was really beautiful to hear your stories. I hear Svenja is completing a part of her life and moving to an uncharted territory, and I hear Sigurborg is bringing some of her wisdom into the world. So I love this kind of both at the same time. So thank you for that. So we're going to move in now into an interesting section, but playful section. So in our events at Totelly, we observed it is often very beautiful to see people learning from one another, especially when we come from different generations. In this section, I'm going to invite you to switch roles, where each one of you is a podcast host and the other is your guest. I encourage you to think of something you would like to learn or understand better from the other person. So, Sigurborg, would you like to start as the podcast host? And
Yes.
So you are the host, and Svenja is the guest.
Yes. So I'm curious, Svenja, like for you personally, and possibly people your age, how do you feel about, like, I wonder if your generation sometimes feels overwhelmed with where the world is coming to, or what sort of tasks you have in your lifetime on this planet.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Definitely me personally. Yeah, I feel a lot of overwhelm. I've found a lot of overwhelm with the people that I interviewed for my thesis, which was mostly people of my generation, actually, not intentionally, but just happened to be that way. And I mean, I've been reading a lot about this too. I think for me, it kind of manifests in not necessarily a struggle, but just the question of time. Like, what do I fill my time with that is sort of meaningful? Because for me, it feels really strange to have completed this 2-year degree now, learning all about these environmental crises and all the origins and how capitalism is such a big factor that drives environmental destruction, and then picturing myself going into a career of any sort, really, like it just seems kind of strange to, which I mean, obviously I'm also working right now, so I am part of this system. And at this time of my life, it feels a bit strange to just picture myself going into, maybe an office job or something, like working a 9-to-5 job and just then having to make this money and drive a car to make it, like, to even make my schedule work and all these things. So I think that's a kind of overwhelming factor for me. I think that's also something that is already changing and will change more. Yeah.
Can you say more about when you say you feel it's changing and will change more? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at least in many countries, we kind of see a trend of reduced working hours, like, 4-day work week, and these kind of things are kind of on the rise, I guess. And I do think that my generation maybe has a new relationship with work, where they feel like, we aren't the generation that built up countries after wars or sustained countries through wars or anything. Like, we've always lived in a relatively stable and safe environment where work is kind of sustaining systems we have created and not a necessary thing that we need to do, if that makes sense. Which, I mean, looking at how the world is going, that might change again soon also. But I do feel like we're kind of seeing a trend of a different work-life balance, if that makes sense. And I think many people maybe don't think about this, but I think many people do feel like the same way as I do. Like, they learn all about these environmental crises and climate change and so on. And then it just feels really weird to just learn this and then keep going business as usual, So I feel like there kind of has to be a shift.
I find that really interesting because, I hear from people of my generation, like, young people are not, as responsible in work. Like, they don't think like us. And, like, especially with my parents' generation, you were defined by your work, and hardworking was the best, you could achieve. If someone would say you were hardworking. And it's interesting, I haven't thought of it. Like you say, some people might be aware of this and others not. But I haven't really thought of it before as something that actually, it's almost like going against the laws of capitalism.
Yeah.
Something needs to change. And that's probably one interesting change that might be happening, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to think of this intergenerational aspect of it because, of course, like, especially when, shifting to renewable energy, for example, like maybe my parents' or grandparents' generation, they probably worked in some sort of fossil fuel energy sector and kind of built up Germany and built up the wealth there and such. So now, like, our generation just wanting to move away from that and having a different relationship to work, for a lot of people, it probably feels very personal and kind of almost like an attack and underappreciation of the work that they have done. So I think it's important to kind of navigate that and, communicate and talk about this.
So one conclusion that I can draw from what you've said is that my generation, instead of just judging young people for not being hardworking enough, we should just ask.
Yeah.
Like, what are your values? What matters to you? And really put ourselves into your shoes. And what you're saying about building up countries after wars, and like, that was the task at hand, but the task at hand is probably very different right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So the hat is on your head now, Svenja. Your podcast host.
I'm sort of curious because you mentioned the two worlds kind of that you live in, like the spiritual and the material world. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on when do you get a strong sense of what world is needed right now, and how do you kind of play between those worlds and kind of work from both of them?
It's a good question. It makes me think of a woman who has been one of the spiritual teachers on my journey, Gloria Karpinski, who says, "Be in this world, but not of it." So that if we are defined by the material world, then that kind of, we're kind of victims to that. But we can't, well, she's actually saying we have to be there. We have to, that is our journey in this lifetime on this earth. But I realized the example I just took about from when I trained as a yoga teacher is that I can't thrive if I don't have a spiritual practice and spiritual awareness. And in my public participation work, for me, that is also like I'm facilitating a meeting. That is, I'm tapping into my spiritual well, so to speak, but I'm not addressing it. I'm not talking about it. I might bring a talking stick to close off a meeting, and then sometimes there are some people that just, run out of the room because they don't want to take part in that. But somehow to be able to weave that together without it becoming threatening to those involved. And for me personally, it's like I've struggled with my attitude towards money. And my aunt, my grandmother's sister, she used to say, money is a very good servant, but a bad boss. So yes, I am in this material world. I need to, whatever it is needed to sustain my being, I do need money to have shelter and food and to be able to also like travel abroad and attend a dance workshop or whatever it is. And yeah, but it is these two strands of this life journey weave together, and it's like we say, like as within, so without. So the source, it comes from within. And I actually feel that if we are not going to be victims to hardcore capitalism, as we maybe are now, we need to tap into that part of who we are. We need to realize who we are as spiritual beings if something is to change. And that feels really important to me. But the way it can be for some, and we each have to find our path. And there's nothing right or wrong in this. But for me, it's not to just withdraw and practice my yoga and dance and meditation. And I somehow need to bridge that. Yeah. And it can be challenging because in both ways, So that's what comes to mind with that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It makes so much sense to me the way you say it, because of like spirituality is also in the material world, kind of like that's kind of what unites us all. Like everyone is grounded by taking a deep breath and really feeling their feet on the ground, no matter if they live in capitalism or if they're a monk living somewhere far off societies, kind of a thing. Thank you.
Beautiful. I really enjoyed hearing both of your hosting hats. you're welcome to be future podcast hosts. I think you're both very well versed in your conversation, so thank you for that. So we're going to move to the next part of the podcast, and this is where within the project, we wrote various articles and also created videos on various themes on how the regenerative lifestyle, through the regenerative lifestyle lens. So now we're going to go through the 8 themes that we discussed in our articles and just get some perspective from you on how you would approach it. So the first theme is self-care. And this kind of, I think, ties in beautifully to the conversation we just had about connecting with yourself to be able to make a change in the world. So self-care influences not only our personal well-being, but also our relationships with others and our connection to nature. And so, Svenja, how does self-care and environmental well-being intertwine in your life?
So I thought it was interesting that you, Sigurborg, mentioned after yoga teacher training bliss kind of earlier, because I feel like one thing that really means self-care for me is practicing yoga. And when I am done, after a yoga practice, I feel so I feel kind of in the best state to make any decisions, if that makes sense. I feel like after I'm practicing yoga, I will, be always choosing a healthy meal for myself. So more self-care. I would always, if I go out for a walk afterwards and see a piece of trash on the ground, I would pick it up. And so I think that self-care has everything to do with environmental well-being, because it allows you to kind of get into this state of being at ease and relaxed and also more aware of what's happening around you. So I think it automatically leads you to caring more about what's around you. And it makes you feel more connected to yourself. And that, I think, translates into feeling more connected to what's around you. And if you realize you're entirely connected and dependent on what's around you, then you care for it more and you want to take care of it. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. I really felt the strength of, as you take care of yourself, you naturally have the impetus to want to take care of others. Sigurborg, how would you imagine, or how would you describe a well-lived life that included both self-care and respect for nature?
And sorry, self-care and
nature.
The
environment. Yeah.
It's only recently, fairly recently, that it really hit home that my greatest responsibility is towards myself, in the sense that how I live my life and how I take care of myself. It's like, because maybe I went a little too far in trying to save the world, in finding that balance of self-care and really following your passion and trying to do something good in this world. It can be tricky. So for quite some time, I've edged a little too far in putting my energy out. So, and I did go through, I had cancer 6 years ago, I had burnout following that. And now, 6 years later, I'm just really getting it that I need to first and foremost take care of myself. And it also ties in with the need for recognition. But the big, very important way for me to take care of myself is, yes, being in nature. I spend less time in nature, though, than I would like, and that I know would be good for me. but living in a small village and just taking in the mountains when I unlock the door in the morning. But there was a very special moment for me when I first went swimming in the sea, in the cold sea in Iceland. And it was like just becoming one with nature. It was just being immersed in nature. There wasn't a separation. And of course there isn't, but somehow the cells in my body got that. And then there might be a seal, and there are the birds, and there is the energy of the waves. And it's been a while since I went swimming in the sea, and I feel how deeply I miss it. And yeah, so I don't know if this somehow makes sense, but it's just, I think it's easy to, if that is our mentality, or if that's how we are, to get carried away in doing rather than being. And I keep quoting, I'm realizing we keep quoting all these wise women in my life, but a dear friend, a storyteller, Ivanir, said, we can't only always breathe out, we have to breathe in. And to breathe in, it depends on where we are, like being in nature and smelling the trees and the air and the earth. It's a different kind of nourishment than being in a closed room. So yes, it's all one.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I relate to the feeling of sometimes overextending oneself, driven by passion, and then remembering to take those moments of self-reflection and moments in nature. I think when one's driven by one's passion, it can sometimes take a toll on one's time for self. We're going to move on to the second theme, food. Our relationship to food is close to our communities and homes. Sigurborg, could you share how has your relationship with food and waste changed over the years? Possibly you have some tips that you might want to share about how you personally deal with this area in your life.
Well, I have struggled in my relationship with food. I've had food addiction, and I have found ways to find balance in that, but it doesn't come naturally. And I sometimes think like, wow, there are actually people who just eat and enjoy their food, and they stop when they're full, and they eat when they're hungry, and they prepare their food, and they make sure they have the food they need in their refrigerator or whatever. So in my ideal world, I would be growing my own vegetables, and I did a little bit of that for a while, but then I just had to come to terms with like that isn't me. Like my energy wants to go elsewhere. It's like, yeah. But finding a balance with food addiction has actually helped me to eat more vegetables. I went through a time when I didn't eat any red meat, but I do that now. There came a point when I really needed it somehow. My father has sheep, and so I've had the amazing Icelandic lamb throughout the years, and like it's from my father's stock. But there's also this point of food waste and the beautiful cycle of composting. And I did mention in the introduction an environmental project that I was managing in the East in Egilsstaðir. And one of the things we did was to support people in composting. And the nursery school also started composting. And I had an old freezer where I was composting. And I loved that cycle, just seeing that cycle and taking part in that cycle. And where I'm at now with food is that it needs to sustain me and sustain me well so that I have energy. And it also grounds me. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
For sure. Svenja, what is your emotional or personal connection to food, like beyond its simple nutritional one?
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's in food management actually. So I learned a lot about food then. And I was leading a vegan lifestyle for like 10 years or something, starting pretty young. I recently started eating like dairy and eggs again. So I try to, I think food has a lot to do with social connections and connecting to where you're from and culture and such. I grew up in a household where there was a lot of importance on eating meals together and really cherishing that as a family time. And I definitely carry that with me. Yeah, and I think, it's like kind of what you said now, Sigurborg, the idea of connecting to the world with food and connecting to what's around you really speaks to me, because it's the kind of the one thing that all of us eat, and it's always coming from the earth, right? So I find that really beautiful. Yeah, but I also, I think most women probably have had some struggle with food at some point in their lives. So there was definitely also times where I restricted myself, or, felt like I needed to lose weight or such things. And I feel similar in terms of, I admire when people just naturally have a very good sense of what they need and how much and such. That's definitely also something that I kind of need to consciously work on to get there. Yeah. And I have also gardened in Iceland and really enjoyed that process actually. And I've also composted, not where I live now, but at our old apartment. And I was kind of amazed how easy it was, because for some reason I had this idea that I had never composted before. And for some reason I had the idea it's really difficult and it would be more difficult in Iceland. And it just worked really well. So, yeah.
Can I add a little bit here? When you were speaking, Svenja, the self-care, and this ties in really. It's like, and for me, it's a spiritual thing when we don't sabotage ourselves with, we find balance in our relationship with food. But what I really wanted to add is that it's beautiful, and I learned that many years ago from other people. Me and my husband, most of the time, we bless our meal. When we sit down to a meal, we bless it. We thank the earth and, the sun and the water and the sea and, all those gifts. And it's precious. There's something very precious about that. And also when I changed my relationship with food, spending time on preparing food, being in the kitchen, it's like a meditation, it's a grounding practice. So like in our world, we rush, we buy something and we quickly throw it in the microwave or whatever. And I think that is very, very, on a very deep level, very bad for us.
I love that you mentioned the blessing, and I think that's beautiful. And I'm personally not religious, and I think many people aren't anymore nowadays, but I do think that those kind of community and like sacred rituals are something so good for us, and we kind of lost touch with them through kind of the moving away from religion in a lot of places. So I think it's really beautiful to incorporate such practices without them having to be like religious thing.
Beautiful. I really value your input in terms of just remembering where our food comes from and taking the time to appreciate the process of bringing the food, whether you grow it yourself or you know, from a shop or a farmer, and having that relationship of the process of preparing it and giving gratitude to it so that it nurtures you and takes care of you. Thank you for all the wealth and authenticity being shared in this podcast. It's already so much wealth that we're harvesting from these conversations. We have about 5 more themes to discuss. I think we'll go a bit faster in pace now. We have about 30 minutes remaining. So theme number 3 is about fashion. Fashion is an expression of our self-identity, but in recent past, it has become a large contributor to waste and consumerism. Svenja, would you like to add some thoughts about, from your generation, how you see fast fashion and also fashion in your personal life?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to start with the personal because that feels a little easier. I mean, I do wear fast fashion, but I try to just buy as much as I can secondhand, almost all of it. I love the swap community here in Iceland. I use that a lot. Yeah. And then about my generation, I mean, I think fast fashion is a huge problem in our generation, my generation. I think it has a lot to do with the disconnect that we already talked about. We're not really feeling connected to the earth, to other people, and globalization has, quote unquote, enabled us to harvest cheap labor and produce fast and a lot. And then there's like a whole cycle about it. Once you're in it, you kind of have to buy more because it breaks quickly. So there's a lot of layers to it. I think the question on if we can kind of move beyond fast fashion has a lot to do if we're willing to kind of authentically look at this and really reflect on it. And I think it's more of a paradigm shift that needs to kind of go hand in hand with shifting to more sustainable, long-lasting clothing options.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. Sigurborg, what role did repairing or reusing clothes in your youth, or could you share what is your oldest piece of clothing that you own and how have you kept it? That's relevant to you?
It's open to interpretation, but I would say my oldest piece of clothing is my national costume. The gold-plated silver on the national costume was something that my grandmother had collected and gave to my mother on her deathbed. At the time, my mother was 7, and she didn't make the costume, but I did. So that would be the one that goes furthest back. But I have, like you, Svenja, and I'm not sure that's typical for my generation, but me and my husband, we regularly go to secondhand markets. And I fear, like, a funny thing was because I had lost some weight and I thought, I have all these clothes, they're nice clothes, but they're too big. And maybe I'll just sell them rent a stall at this secondhand market. And I packed these things and no, they're not as many as I thought. But on I went and I'm seeing what people are selling. And I think, how come people have all these clothes? It's just, I can't get it. And it is obviously true that online shopping is working in the way that sometimes people just buy 3 different sizes because they don't know which one will fit. And I don't get it. But then I sometimes think I'm wearing my best shoes, the high-heeled shoes I have. I bought them 12 years ago, but you talked about paradigm shift. I know we're moving at a faster pace now, and I wonder what needs to happen. And somehow I'm realizing in our conversation now more and more that somehow I think it has to do with our connection with ourselves. That we shift from being so much on the consumer path, and that needs, I don't know. I wonder if it has to do with where does our self-worth come from?
Yes, beautiful question to leave it there at the end of this topic. Very beautiful. So we'll move on to the next theme, which is technology. Technology has often been equated to the hyper speed at which we function today. Sigurborg, what is your experience with technology? Does anything about technology scare you today? Do you think technology simplifies or complicates life in harmony with nature?
There are a lot of things I love about technology, and like the fact that we can be here. We're in 3 different places. We are connecting, and COVID taught us this, and possibilities opened up. I love this. I love the fact that it simplifies a lot, but I dread all the time that I'm spending on doing all kinds of things.
I think oh yeah.
So we left off where you said we're dreading where technology might be heading, Sigurborg.
Mainly AI and the time we spend on social media, like we're not present with each other and it also applies to myself. I fear where that is going to take us and already has taken us.
Thank you for that. And to Svenja, how do you think apps and gadgets support a sustainable lifestyle? Are there any that you enjoy creating, and any comment to what Sigurborg said?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I mean, I think the beauty of technology is that it allows us this open universe to learning new things and to connecting. But at the same time, I do think that social media often feels us or leaves us feeling less connected, even though I would guess that the original idea was to connect us more. But I think we've drifted quite far from that. So I'm not sure I'm not saying that all technology is bad by any means, but I'm not sure if I could say that I can necessarily think of apps and gadgets that support a sustainable lifestyle. But I mean, I think there are some things like Ecosia, like a more sustainable search engine, or there's apps that can help you recognize like plants or mushrooms and such things. I do think that technology can kind of maybe bridge the gap to a lot of like ancient knowledge and wisdom that we maybe haven't really passed on as much as we could have. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I think this kind of, we seem to be circling always back to the self-care element of really thinking about what is the purpose that we're using technology for, and having a bit more conscious awareness of why we're engaging on it.
Mm-hmm.
I will move on to word like in super speed now. So the next theme is about free time. So one of the benefits of technology is saving time, as you mentioned, and increasing connectedness. But paradoxically, despite unimaginable advancements, we are more alienated, disconnected, and deprived of free time than truly liberates us. Before. So, Svenja, what does that sound like for you? How do you manage your free time? And how do people at your age generally choose to do it?
Yeah, this one is speaking to me. And I guess it's something that, I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I do feel like my free time is very consumed by consumption. Like, I feel like there's like technology definitely has led to me almost always passively consuming something, whether it's a podcast or I mean, I don't really listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I know a lot of people in my generation who say they read, but really they listen to an audiobook, which I'm not saying it's wrong to listen to audiobooks, but I think the whole idea of we're just always doing multiple things at a time and always having something in the back, like going in the back at all times. I think that is a bit concerning, and I can't really, I'm definitely part of this, and I have to be very conscious to have times where I only do one thing or even do nothing. Yeah, so I think that's a big burden of technology and of the whole idea in general to always be consuming something.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sigurborg, what hobbies do you enjoy, and are there any that bring you more joy than others? What are the things you like to do in your spare time?
Go for walks, just move, yoga and dance and read. And there was a time when I had been overworked for some time, and I even had in my home, I had my work in my home, my office space, and my living room was where I was teaching yoga, big space. And I remember looking over my living room and thinking, okay, where in this house do I really relax? Apart, and I didn't count in just sitting in the room watching the TV. And I started retraining myself to lie down on the sofa and read a book. I want to read a book and flip the pages. So I do that. And it was just an interesting thing to discover that I needed to retrain myself in that. I love spending time with family. I have really good quality time with my father, who's 91, and I go twice a week to Stikkishólmur, where he lives, and I join him for the walks he has with my brother's dog. And we walk at a slow pace. We walk in the forestry area, and this really sustains me. I love cherish these moments. So, yeah. And I think it's just very important because for a while in my life, I would be like working really hard, really at heavy workload for quite some time. And then I would go and relax, go abroad or something and just relax. But it needs to weave in. That's what I learned from my burnout. It needs to be an everyday practice to unwind, to relax. And yeah, I spend too much time on social media as well. And I remember I think it was a couple of years ago, when Facebook went out for an hour, and I felt the relief. Like it didn't work at all. Like there was electricity and everything, but Facebook went out, and it was this, so good to get rid of that. But so I guess I'm not quite in the driver's seat with my consumption of social media.
That's what they want you to be, not in the driver's seat. I mean, but you're more profitable that way.
Beautiful. So this is again a reminder the lessons that I'm harvesting from this part is mindful awareness of one's time and building in cycles, being aware of how your ebbs and flows, and reminding to have some rest in between. The next theme is about green spaces. It's said that 15 minutes in nature reduces stress levels and boosts our emotional well-being. Both of you have spoken about some aspects of some relationship to going outside in nature. Could you touch upon, Sigurborg, some of your nature experiences maybe in your youth, and how that has informed you, maybe?
Like in my youth, it would be very much about like the strongest memories I have of spending time in nature are also family time. So doing something around the sheep, my father's sheep, and also us, the family, going in wintertime, like not on sledge, but going up to a mountain with these big, from the inside of huge truck wheels, like, so we would sit on those and slide down and at great speed, and also when I was in my 40s, I had or 30s probably, I went a few times on a snowmobile trip in the Northeast. And it was like a few days trip, and we were sleeping in those mountain sheds, mountain huts. And I remember the first one, I was an overworked, stressed hotel manager at the time. And the snowmobile was traveling at 9 kilometers per hour. And it took me like 1 or 2 days to slow down to that pace. And when I came back after a 5 days trip, it felt like it was as if I had been on a trip abroad for 2 weeks or, even more. It was very, very, very nourishing. And yeah, it's a highlight in my life of spending time in nature.
Lovely. Svenja, how do you think your generation could contribute to more green spaces in city, if this resonates to you? Or do you think it's something that is out of your hands, or maybe you relate to some nature experiences, whatever feels like you want to share at this time?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure exactly. I don't think it's out of our hands. This makes me think of, I went to Berlin a couple of years ago, and this was with my school where I did my bachelor's, and we visited this community garden, and it was an old graveyard that they had converted into a community garden project. And it was, I don't exactly know how it was funded, but it was entirely just volunteer work, basically. People who like lived in a city and didn't have a garden really, but wanted to garden. And so they just came there and grew stuff together and worked on it together. And then at the end of the season, harvested things together, and everyone could take some home of it. And that was really beautiful. And they had like a little stage and cafe type of thing there that they used the produce from the garden for. And it was just a really lovely community project. And I think things like that are definitely something that we can contribute to. And at the same time, I also think, like in Iceland, even if you live in Reykjavik, so the biggest city, you're so close to the ocean, you're so close to mountains, you have nature very close by. And I think it's also a matter of actually going there and connecting to it and actually seeing it as what it is. Because I feel like a lot of times we just drive by these big mountains and they're there, but we don't really acknowledge them. So I think that's also something, or even just, walking through heavy winds and you feel nature on your skin that way. I think connecting to nature can come in a lot of different ways. And ideally, there would be a lot of green spaces. And I think without them, we can still connect to nature, or with less of them.
Lovely. Thanks for that reminder of greens. You did mention you were gardening in Iceland. How have you been doing that? I'm curious. Did you join a community garden space or on your balcony?
At our old apartment, there was like a shared garden or a shared backyard, and there was some garden beds and nobody was using them. So we got to use them. We had a really nice landlord. So, and we had been doing some gardening here on our balcony, but it wasn't as successful, just a bit smaller space. But yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. So the next theme, we've got 2 more left and we have 5 minutes. So let's see how we can do this. The next theme is coexistence with all living beings, human and non-human. We need to overcome the separation between humans and nature in order to cultivate a harmonious coexistence with all living beings, regardless of their perceived usefulness to us. I'm going to open up the floor with no specific questions. You think about just living in harmony with other beings. I will choose Svenja first.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of the core topic that needs to be addressed. And I think it's also one of the topics that is really not largely looked at in like political discourses and such. And I think, yeah, it has a lot to do with really like being brave and allowing ourselves to move to a different world. Because I think if we truly connect and live in harmony with nature, we need to change a lot of things quite drastically, and that can be scary. And I think that's just something that we tend to avoid as of now. So I think that's really important that it becomes like a more largely discussed topic that we don't only see as a threat, but also as an opportunity to thrive more.
Any comments to that?
I just want to say aho, Svenja. I just totally, that resonates very deeply with me, what you're saying. And it's important that we realize that all is one.
Nice and sexy. Thank you. This reminds me also of the wave of the ecocide movement, which is also working with the indigenous cultures, where they're moving towards giving rights to different beings, different consciousness, rivers, or different animals that are relative to the local space. And our final theme is home. Home is where the heart is. The home can serve as a connection space for ourselves and with those close to us. Sigurborg, you mentioned before about how you used to have your home as a workspace, and then you realized you needed to make space for yourself within that for some rest. How do you see your connection to home and how it nurtures you?
It needs to be a place where I come in through the door and I can relax and I can enjoy beauty. I enjoy what I see, and I feel best in my home when I take really good care of it, not over cleaning, but just, when it's clean. And I rented a room for a while with a friend, and we had shared a flat together with other people before. And when I then bought my own apartment and moved in, I realized there was a level of stress somehow that, I was able to relax more deeply in my own place. So, yeah, and then there are routes in the area where I live at any given time. And when I was studying in the UK, came to Iceland to work for the West Fjords, in the West Fjords, and I realized, standing up on a mountain road and just, I love this land. I realized I couldn't live anywhere else for a long time, over an extended period of time, except in Iceland. That is my home.
Very beautiful. And Svenja, how does this resonate to you since you're in a space of transition in your life? How does home relate to you?
Yeah, I do feel quite transitory about this right now. But the thing that you said about, getting into a space and really feeling like you can instantly relax, that really resonates with me. And that I think is kind of something that home has always meant to me, no matter where it is. And I think I will carry that into the future as well. I think also just like in general, the existence on Earth feels like home to me. And I mean, also just given my current circumstances is something that the meaning of the words holds for me right now.
Thank you so much. So I will close off the session now. We won't go into the, firing questions. So thank you, Svenja and Sigurborg, for your rich and insightful sharings. I think we've learned a lot from what you had to share, and many lessons and harvesting from this recording. I have truly enjoyed it. I invite our listeners to consider the questions for themselves. How do these themes emerge in your life? How has your life been shaped by the influences around you and the generation you are born in? How can we embrace and hold all perspectives, not necessarily agreeing with all of them, but holding a space that includes this and that simultaneously? We welcome you to visit our website, Totelly, Totel.ly, and click on the section that reads Projects. You can find more information about Connection Regenerator project, as well as all the articles and videos we referred to on these topics today. We welcome you to like this video and follow our channel. From the Connection Regenerator project team, we thank you for listening.